righty, welcome to this edition of At the Mic. I'm your host, Keith Malinak. I appreciate you joining me on this Thursday afternoon. I guess I've been gone for quite a while, missed a couple weeks traveling to the Northeast. Such a great trip, such a beautiful part of our country. And I would highly recommend, if you get a chance to see New England in the fall, to take advantage of that. See every corner of our country. I was very much amazed at the state of Maine, but of course, New Hampshire, Vermont, even Massachusetts, Rhode Island. Shout out to you. Just a lovely part of the country. So highly recommend getting up there. So thanks for your patience. I know that I left in the middle of a intense time this election season, but I wanted to get right back on track with rooting out election fraud as we head closer and closer to November 5th. It's obviously a very important election, and we've learned a lot of lessons since the last time around in 2020. And it's my job to bring voices to you, people that understand this stuff, this behind the scenes stuff when it comes to election integrity and the sacredness of our vote and how to protect it. Much more than I ever could. And so I've sought out these people, these kind of individuals, and y'all have brought these people to my attention, and I'm grateful for that. And I want to introduce my guest today, someone that I am just getting to know, and it is Patrick Colbeck. And Patrick, before we get started, I want you to explain kind of your background. I know that you have served in the Michigan State House, right? I mean, so you've got the political background.
Yeah.
You're a book author, which, by the way, check out his books, Wrestling Gators and the 2020 Coup. But, I mean, you ran for governor. You have been in the teeth of the machine. So introduce yourself and just tell us how you got involved in exposing all of this fraud that has seeped into so many areas of our elections.
Well, first, a shout out to one of your ardent listeners, my friend Audrey Keena and her husband Jim, who's a great author in his own right. They're the ones who connected the dots between the two of us. So
that's how I
I
know
want to
you.
give them a shout out. But yeah, background. By the way, I was in Michigan Senate, never served in the Michigan House.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay.
No, it's all right. I don't think I could handle the chaos in the Michigan House, and the Michigan Senate was a little bit more structured. And my overall background is that of an engineer, so I feel a little bit more comfortable over in the Senate with a little more structure.
Where you got to work closely with Gretchen Whitmer, who would go on to be governor, correct?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I worked closely with her, but I definitely had to keep a close eye on her and what she was up to as the minority leader in the Michigan Senate at the time. So, you know, I've often wanted to get up and make sure she understood what was really going on a regular basis on the Senate floor, and was held back significantly by my Senate Majority Leader at the time.
Yeah. And by the way, before we go any further, let me get this. I haven't even checked. Normally I check the banners, like the nameplates there of everyone. Yeah. So I don't know if you want to change this or add this, but if people want to follow you on Twitter, because your feed is excellent at red flagging all of the stuff that's going on nationwide, really, as it relates to election integrity. But follow Patrick at PJ Colbeck. Is that right? At PJ
Yeah,
Colbeck?
COLBECK.
Yeah,
Charlie Oscar Lima, Bravo Echo, Charlie Kilo.
Okay, I'll make a thing right now for you here, and I would highly encourage people to follow you over there. Okay, so all right, I've got a whole bunch of stuff here, and you are very knowledgeable about this stuff. Where do you want to begin? You're based in Michigan. I know that. Oh, you know what? Let me ask you this. Okay, let me start here, and then we'll go. So many things we have to cover, Patrick. You tweeted out, I don't know, a few days ago here about the Michigan Attorney General, because we want to believe that that every state's on lockdown now. Oh, we learned our lesson. Republicans are gonna fix everything since 2020. We can believe that those 6 problem child states that really messed up everything November 4 years ago. Everything's fixed, right? Everything's golden. Well, let's start.
Fixed is right. Yeah.
I'm careful with my word choice. So, talk to me about the Michigan Attorney General and how, I guess there's we got late votes now coming in that are acceptable there, because that is one of those states, Michigan, that was. Congratulations to George Soros and the Secretary of State project, because that was one of the states in his sights, if I'm not mistaken, that definitely fell victim to Project SOS, right? And I guess that corruption continues.
Yeah, and this is a textbook case of why election integrity matters, because in the wake of the 2020 election, where folks like myself were sounding the clarion call to say we got to address what happened in 2020, in the 2022 election, the Michigan lost control of the Michigan Senate and the legislature for the first time in over 3 decades. They lost control of the House. They lost control of all the executive branches in the previous. So this is because we didn't address that fraud. Essentially now, I would submit we actually have the criminals making the laws, which has led to a very bad situation in my home state of Michigan and very frustrating state of affairs. So recently, I think you're referring to the Michigan Attorney General. Her name is Dana Nessel, and she's famous for getting drunk on Bloody Marys at a Michigan State game and having to be escorted out of the stands by her security detail.
Oh no.
That's what we're dealing with our Michigan Attorney General, just so you know. Okay. She was asked to issue an Attorney General opinion. Now, just so you know, Attorney General opinions are typically regarded as if they're law. So, you got your Constitution, you got your statute, but you also have these AG opinions that are typically treated as law. And she interpreted a recent proposal to amend Michigan's Constitution around the counting of ballots to essentially give an extra day because there was a holiday involved. So not only did the recent Michigan constitutional amendment enable what I believe is one of the most egregious practices from an election integrity perspective that we have, called early voting. Not only did it introduce early voting, it now also introduced late voting, and our Attorney General just extended that late voting from 6 days to 7 days. So there you have it. It's if they can't get the answer that they want, they're just going to keep on adding days to the election cycle until they get the answer that they want.
So, wow. Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's Michigan. Maybe there's good news out there in some of these.
We do have good fall colors here, Keith. It's really nice.
I'll have to get to Mackinac Island next for sure. Okay. So I've got some anecdotal evidence here in front of me that looks like a good news scenario. But we'll see if you shoot them down. I'm
all for good news. I really am.
Well, let me back up here. There was something that I've had 3 conversations now with Jovan Pulitzer about the rigging of our elections. And one of the, I guess, fun facts that he shared that I found stunning is that the whole setup to rig our elections in favor of the left goes back to before 2016. And in fact, you can go back to the 90s really on some of this stuff. But 2016, they did actually have a system in place to win the election for Hillary Clinton. But Donald Trump's support was so real and so overwhelming that they weren't able to pull that off and steal that from him. Obviously, we know what happened in 2020. So now as we fast forward to 2024, I mean, yes, as I say, you have to make it too big to rig. I mean, it's a shame we can't win by just one vote. The margin has to be so much greater. Yeah. So as I'm saying this and setting up what I hope is good news, I'm also thinking in the back of my mind as I'm formulating my question, Well, crap. I mean, there's 8 more years of them getting entrenched in some of these places and really solidifying and really making their cheat system even more sophisticated, no doubt. But I'm sure you heard the news earlier this week when early voting started on Tuesday in Georgia. They had record turnout. They had 252,000 people show up to early vote on day one, which almost doubled the previous record from 2020, which was 133,000. So we've gone from 133,000 to 252,000 early votes day one, Georgia. Now, yesterday, we got even more anecdotal news out of Georgia, and that was that GOP counties, if you want to call them that, in other words, they're getting that label from the 2022 Governor Kemp election. So counties that went for Kemp, we're going to call Republican, and counties that went for his opponent, we're going to call Democrat for this exercise. Well, that early voting day one, those GOP counties were +4 compared to the previous cycle, early election, early voting day one. The Democrat counties were -3. So I don't know how specific you are prepared to talk about Georgia, but based on kind of what has transpired there over the last 4 years, based on this here, this data, and the fact that we've done this before, we've beaten a too big to rig scenario in favor of Donald Trump. Do you, from your vantage point in Michigan, see stuff like that starting to trickle in? Arizona, we had a report from MSNBC. They couldn't find a Kamala voter to go on camera. And the parking lot was crazy full. And people there, it appeared en masse to vote early for Donald Trump. So I know it's a very long-winded setup, but just from your vantage point, and I know you only want to deal with facts, and I totally appreciate that, but how are you feeling about, can I at least ask you that? What's the vibe for Patrick Colbeck, who is knee-deep in this stuff every day?
Well, I think I'm going to refer back to what a friend of mine has conveyed to me, which I think is a good adage for our upcoming election, is that Trump has to win by 20 in order to win by 1.
And it's so maddening.
It is very maddening. But here's what's really maddening. Going out the early voting projections, I get it. It's good to have voter turnout, period. So I'll just put that preface up before I say what I'm going to say. But early voting itself is really bad. And if you understand how they steal the elections, which I outline in my book, The 2022, I break it down into 4 phases. One is preparation phase, which essentially is where they create and expand weaknesses in our election system, which is primarily mail-in voting is a primary weakness that we have because it's a third-party transaction. There's a lot of aspects of it that the voter himself is not engaged in, so it's susceptible to fraud. But also early voting is one of those big issues, and we can get into that a little bit later with what I saw at the Detroit Public Accuracy Test. But the second phase is essentially depends upon an accurate projection of voter turnout. And it essentially allows you to say, hey, we need X number of votes in this precinct, X number of votes in this county, X number of votes in this state in order to carry the election. And we can use weaknesses in the election system like mail-in voting to prep a whole bunch of pre-prepared ballots to stuff into various jurisdictions as we need it based on our projection or forecast of how many votes we need to steal or inject in that particular area. And by the way, I'm saying this in context of my background, watching what happened as a poll challenger in the 2020 election at TCF Center in Detroit, where they had the 3:30 a.m. Deliveries of ballots, of tens of thousands of ballots with zero chain of custody around them. So we know this exists. This ballot injection existed not just in Michigan, but Justice Gableman talked about it in Wisconsin when they had Brooklyn attorney Mark Spitzer Rubenstein going off and phoning in orders for ballots into Green Bay, Wisconsin. So this stuff happens all the time. And when you do early voting, you give them that projection of how many votes they need to stuff. And so the next phase is machine-based manipulation. That's where my friend Mike Lindell comes into the equation and highlights all the security vulnerabilities inherent with these electronic voting systems and the last phase is the defense phase, where they try to prevent you discussing any of the previous 3 phases and any discussion on it. And I mean, we were just talking about,
it happened in Michigan, right? Where tell us on that front, as far as even being able to challenge the vote, what is that all about up there from a few weeks ago, a ruling of some sort?
Well, in Michigan, there's a bunch of things that go along with this. First of all, we got our attorney general who prosecuted alternate slate of Republican electors and charging them with offenses that could put them in jail for 81 years, just because they wanted to be an alternate slate of electors in an election that I would submit as a former state legislator who served as vice chair of the Elections and Government Reform Committee, who was actually a certified poll challenger, who witnessed the certification activities or certification vote in Wayne County, which is where I'm a resident, which is where Detroit's located. And I saw that the Republican canvassers voted no on certification in Wayne County. They went off later and issued a conditional yes vote. The conditions were never satisfied. I could get into a whole bunch of other details, but ultimately, there is a very strong case to be made that the 2020 election in Michigan was never lawfully certified because Wayne County was never lawfully certified. When I issued FOIA requests for the official certification paperwork, it revealed that there was 0 Republican signatures on it. And per MCL 168.24E, in order for something to take effect and have effect, you have to have at least 1 Republican and 1 Democrat signature. It never happened in Wayne County. And I actually testified to the fact that Wayne County was not certified before the State Board of Canvassers. And if you take Wayne County out of the equation, the rightful winner of the 2020 election would have been Donald Trump for president. That's obviously not the way it was decided here. But in Michigan, they decided to put forward an alternate slate of electors so we could decide that question and have a debate and actually get into the details and audit the election returns, which is all that the Republican canvassers in Wayne County wanted. They didn't want to just not certify for the sake of not certifying. They wanted an audit. And so I think so that's one example how our Michigan Attorney General is sitting there trying to penalize anybody that wants to call into question what's really going on here. And then recently, there was another discussion around, I think maybe you're referring to the fact that our Michigan Secretary of State threatened canvassers that decided that they didn't want to certify fraudulent election results with criminal prosecution. Our actual Michigan Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, actually went on a video stream and said that if you refuse to certify the elections, we will come for you, which is threatening an election official.
Insane.
And 2 weeks prior to that, the Michigan Attorney General put out a tweet with very similar effect, if you will. And so they're trying to stifle any questioning, any discussion, any debate around how our elections are actually conducted. And I think the 16 electors were perfectly justified in saying that it was righteous to go off and put forward an alternate slate. That's been done in the past, but you'll see what happens in reaction to that. And so I was talking to you before we kicked things off, and my key concern around elections and what I've been focused on since day one is it can be summarized in one word, and that's transparency. On one side of this election integrity debate, you've got people trying to shut down discussion, trying to shut down access. I've received multiple cease and desist letters for me asking some basic questions when we've had a clerk that's raised questions around the conduct elections here in Michigan. Stephanie Scott, she was removed from office by the unelected Michigan Bureau of Elections director. You saw what happened recently to Tina Peters out in Mesa County, Colorado, for just simply doing her job as a clerk by making a forensic backup of the election results so she could have an audit trail preserved on the election. They don't want us peeking behind the curtain of this Wizard of Oz operation. And I, for one, am sick and tired of it. And I think we need more transparency, not less.
And we do need to get into Tina Peters later. That is grotesque.
That was horrible. And she's in prison for 9 years now for doing her job.
And, there are so many good people like yourself who are staying on top of this. and who spend like.
Trust me, I'd rather be doing something else with my life right now. This is not what I want to be doing.
That's my point. And I'm sure that years and years back, let's say before 2020, whatever, let's just pick a date and time. You could have come up with a list of a billion things to do, and this was not on it. And so I am so grateful for intelligent people who want to get to the truth on something so sacred as our elections. People such as yourself, that I actually, this is going to sound so over the top, but it's not. It's like I'm so sad for y'all, because it feels like that from my perspective, you guys have the data on your side, you have the law on your side, you have common sense on your side, yet it doesn't seem to make a real difference. I hope that that's not the case. And I hope that you still have that willingness to fight. I don't know, man.
Well, for me, it's a matter of faith. I mean, this is whatever you do it as if it's for the Lord. And so for me, that's what drives me. And I'm not alone. There's a lot of what I call meddling kids all over the place.
Yeah.
And if you remember back in your Scooby-Doo days, ultimately, you'd have a demasking of the real criminal behind it. Notice that the Mystery Machine guys, Scooby-Doo and crew, they were not the ones that were supposed to be investigating these crimes. That was supposed to be law enforcement, right? And they would just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Which is how I feel about me being a poll challenger in Detroit at the TCS Center in 2020. I mean, listen, I mean, there's a lot of people that are dedicated to this, because I tell you what, and for me, the reason why election integrity is so important is because I get frustrated about what's going on with the border. I get frustrated with what's going on with abortion. I get frustrated with what's going on with our economy across the board. There's a lot of different issues, but you can't make an effective change on any of those policy areas unless you make sure that you have the voice of the people respected at the polls. Once that's gone, you're dealing with dictators and a banana republic, which is essentially what we have here in Michigan right now, and your voice doesn't mean anything to them.
Yeah. Okay, so all right. So conversely, I gave the anecdotal evidence that, hey, look, there's reason to be hopeful. I mean, people cannot get complacent for a nanosecond. You must vote. You must get your friends and your family to the polls, and you must make sure that as many people as possible vote. I was just noticing that the poly market, the betting markets, give an over 62% chance of Donald Trump winning the election now. Harris is down to 38% chance. So that's a gap of 24%. I mean, that's where the money is. So the money is on Trump now. But don't get complacent.
No, not at all.
And I want you to,
and don't get discouraged too when you hear me talking about all the issues we still have with the election system. You got to get out there.
So what's the deal with because before we got started, I said, what's the deal with the 500,000 more registered voters in your state than are eligible? And you're like, 500,000? It's more like 800,000. What is going on there?
Well, there's a big narrative that says, everybody has a right to vote, and they don't sit there and say that everybody that's eligible has a right to vote. And so that's kind of this narrative we've been caught in. And when Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson came into office, she reinstated 800,000 ineligible voters and dumped them back into Michigan's voter registration system after they were purged by the previous Secretary of State, Ruth Johnson, who's now a Michigan State Senator. And I actually had a copy of a memo that she sent out to her colleagues in the Michigan Senate back when Republicans still controlled the legislature. And she was highlighting how Jocelyn Benson injected over 800,000 ineligible voters into our voter rolls. And so, by the way, that's in my book. You can read the whole letter inside my book, The 2022. So that's a concern. Why is this a concern? We were just talking about how mail-in voting is one of the most vulnerable parts of our election system because it's a third-party transaction. If you've got fraudulent voter information inside a voter registration database, you've got a bunch of innocent local election officials, local poll workers, local clerks that depend 100% on the data integrity inside that state voter registration file. And if they've got fake signatures in there, if they got fake addresses and fake names, well, you don't know that when you're actually playing matchmaker between deciding whether or not to give them a ballot or not. If you see a match on the data that you have, that's all you have to go on. You don't even have to appear in person for that. That's why it's a third person transaction. And that's why these inflated voter rolls are so dangerous. I mean, our Secretary of State actually fought back against a lawsuit from the Public Interest Legal Foundation that said, you've got 34,000 dead people on your rolls, get them out of there. And she fought that. So, and I know for 2020, I've done examinations as well. There's a Civil War era veteran, Jason Daniel Lemoyne, who actually voted in the 2020 election. So, and this is according to the state's own record. This isn't me just, creating things out of thin air. So there is a reason to be concerned about that 500,000 or 800,000, or it's probably in the millions right now, because they're going off and pushing illegal voters and illegal immigrants into the voting pool. And they're going overseas with a bunch of expatriates that never even lived in Michigan, but they're going to be voting in Michigan because it's a battleground state.
So, I mean, I think that is something that I think this audience understands, but maybe the casual observer doesn't understand when we talk about voter fraud. It's not, don't imagine just all of these ineligible voters showing up at the polls to vote, right? It's the rolls, it's the names that they can attach to these fraudulent ballots. That's all they're trying. They just want names on the rolls. They don't need people at the polls necessarily. If they have the covert people behind the scenes injecting these ballots into the system connected to people's names, like the Civil War guy.
It's all a big data exercise now, which, I mean, I'm part of my background is I'm a certified Microsoft small business specialist. I'm an IT geek too. I've deployed systems similar to the voting systems we used back when I used to help deploy systems for Microsoft. And so, it literally, so much of our election system now is ran behind the scenes in databases and internet connections across the board with computer systems that our local officials don't understand. And they rely on third parties to go off and show them what to do. It's these NGOs, these third parties that actually run our election now. It's not the local clerks that we elected to do that. It's these third parties, these non-government organizations like Dominion Voting Systems, ES&S, and even, in here, just to put a finer point on it, to show you how bad it's gotten with this privileged access to election records by these non-government organizations who are running our elections right now. Guess what the name of the organization is that the federal government contracted to secure our electronic voting systems that we're told are not connected to the internet?
I feel like Jovan told me this in the last time. What's the name?
It's to secure these electronic voting systems that we're told are not connected to the internet. The federal government, CISA, contracted with an organization called Center for Internet Security.
That's cute. They always do the opposite. They always name bills the opposite of what they do. They always
they're pretty transparent. They're so arrogant with this. It's not even funny. Matter of fact, that CIS, that's the Center for Internet Security, deploys what they call Albert sensors.
Yes, we talked about this. Continue, please.
Oh, good. Yeah. So that's the pinnacle of their arrogance on it. These
before you do that, I just want everybody to understand. Don't you ever for a moment believe some talking head, some politician, somebody, some spokesperson for fill in the blank. Do not believe the lie that these voting machines, they're not connected to the internet. That's the biggest crock of crap. Anyway, continue.
Well, by the way, I saw that firsthand when I was a certified poll challenger in Detroit. I walked around to all the tabulators and I looked on the internet connectivity icon, bottom right-hand corner of all Windows platforms. And these are all Windows platforms. The tabulators were indeed connected to the internet. And when I asked the election officials about that, I said, hey, if you don't have to believe me on it, just roll your mouse cursor over that bottom right-hand corner, that little icon in the corner. And they refused to do it. Because if you do that, it pops up on the screen in text, connected to internet.
Wow.
So, and all their contract documentation talks about internet all over the place. So it's not rocket science to figure out these things are connected to the internet, and they're lying about it.
And they're transmitting the data, and then they know what they need to backfill to get the votes to where they need them to be. It's right there. Okay.
It's all about, as the earlier they know what the vote tally is that they need, the more that they can smooth out the curve so you don't see any of those uncomfortable spikes or shutdowns in the middle of the night, like what happened in 2020, or the what they call the Edison Zero, if you've ever heard that term before, where they're if you haven't heard, this is you probably heard stories of negative vote increments online when people are watching the election results. Well, my background's in engineering, aerospace engineering. I've done some control system analysis and design. I've worked with some other good controls engineers out there as well. One of which is, Draza Smith, and she's phenomenal. And we were looking at the election night reports coming out of Edison Research, which is one of the companies that aggregates the vote tally data across the country and provides it to the media outlets. And when you start looking at that data, there was something called what we call the Edison Zero, because the cumulative vote tallies across all these elections, across all the states, the cumulative vote tallies for Donald Trump and Joe Biden went down to zero at one point during the night, and then came back up and resumed a different slope for their respective votes going forward. In Michigan, that Edison Zero happened at 5 o'clock in the morning. And what's really weird about this is that from a controls engineer perspective, this is the type of behavior you see when you adjust a set point on a digital controller known as a PID controller. And that's what happened, is it resets your cumulative variable to zero, and then you can pick things up back where you left off. So just to put this in context for a lot of the viewers, an example of a digital control is your thermostat or your cruise control in your car. In this case, what they're controlling is not the speed of your vehicle, but the vote percentage allocated to their preferred candidate. So that's red flag. And this CIS, which is one of the reasons I'm so hot and heavy about investigating this organization getting subpoenas, is that they deploy what are called these Albert sensors to monitor the incoming and outgoing internet traffic. They're essentially internet traffic gatekeepers for all election systems across the country. Matter of fact, they've got these Albert sensors installed in counties and local government and state government in all 50 states all across America. So when you start looking at how do you steal an election nationwide, you start looking for where is all that data being vectored into? Where is that being centralized? So when somebody gets a call to shut down all voting at 2 o'clock in the morning on election night or whatever it was, somebody's got to make that call based on having that information at their fingertips. These guys had access to that data. And when you look at their contracts with the respective county governments, which I've done, and you can find copies of this up at letsfixstuff.org, which is another website I run. What they're able to do is look at the decrypted election night results. So they're getting access. This Center for Internet Security has access to voter roll information, voter history data from the poll books, tabulator data before anybody else has access to it. So they're operating behind this curtain of NGO secrecy with all this data privy to them and only them. And so for me, I think that's kind of concerning. And there might be a few others that find that concerning, but here's an extra little tidbit around this organization. That Center for Internet Security, if you review a report that was put out in November of 2023 by Congress with the Weaponization of Government Committee, you will find reference to the Center for Internet Security and their role in creating what's called a misinformation reporting tool as part of what's called the Election Integrity Partnership. So we referred to this earlier around censorship and what's going on with the ability not to talk about Dominion, and we had to refer to it as Dominoes so we wouldn't get demonetized on platforms like YouTube. Well, it turns out that this same organization, the Center for Internet Security, that has privileged access to sensitive election records nationwide is also at the center of preventing citizens with access to that information. They created an incident reporting portal that essentially targeted anybody that was pushing a narrative that was counter to their narrative about the election. So just give you an example. If they find out that Pat Colbeck is going off and talking about the machines in Detroit being connected to the internet, that's flagged as an incident. And that immediately goes into this portal that part of this election integrity partnership were all the big tech giants like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all those guys, the usual suspects, and all the big media folks. And what they would do is create little talking points, that 4 a.m. letter, talking points that would go out to these organizations and say, we're debunking this, we're fact checking this, whatever the euphemism of the day is. And they will go out and make sure that that information is censored and drowned out by whatever their narrative is that they're pushing. So for me, that's why I really, really am interested in this CIS organization, because they are not only having privileged access to the data, they're making sure that nobody else has access to any data that makes sense. And oh, by the way, you remember the community that was responsible for that letter signed by 51 folks from the intelligence community about the Hunter Biden laptop in the lead up to the 2020 election. That was all the intel community, right?
Yeah.
Guess who runs the Center for Internet Security? Bunch of former intel community guys.
Yeah.
So from my perspective, it's suspicious. Matter of fact, the guy who runs Center for Internet Security is a guy by the name of John Gilligan. He used to head up Air Force acquisition back when I was a contractor with the Department of Defense. I was actually in his office out at the Pentagon. He was managing the acquisition of the program that I was supporting at the time. So this is deep, guys. And I never had an appreciation for this when I was serving in the Michigan Senate. I was just an engineer that decided to run for the Michigan Senate. Next thing I know is I find myself in the middle of this deep state cabal that's trying to undermine our system of government, and it's very much earth shattering when you do it. But once you see it, you can't unsee it, and that's why fellow meddling kids and myself are still at this after we started looking into this.
Yeah, I don't think it's a stretch. Do you? Because as you're talking, I'm just thinking it's as if we live behind this digital iron curtain, and it's not a Soviet army marching in here to tell us who our betters are going to be. It's this cabal of digital wizards who have access to our votes, and it's fascinating that, and I talked about this in a live stream I did last night. It takes longer now that we have, because think of any kind of technology advancement in your life in the last 20, 30 years. You get things done faster, right? That's always the case. So now that
it's all about convenience.
Faster, right? But now we've gone from paper and ballots and pencils and getting to know who the next president's going to be before we go to bed on a Tuesday night in November, to now we're using computers. And so the general logic would be that, okay, now we're going to find it even faster because boom, 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 boom. I mean, that's why we have calculators, is to calculate this stuff up on a computer faster than our brains can do it. And yet this realm of voting with all of that technology has now become this process that drags on for days and weeks in some cases. And yet the majority of the public, if you dare question something for us to be so obvious as being nefarious in 2020, then you're a kook. You're that conspiracy theorist. The spin and the debunking narrative has been so effective, and people are terrified to just call out what is so obvious.
I know. Well, you brought up the Soviet Union, right? And Do you remember? Did you listen to Tucker Carlson's first Twitter space that he did after getting the boot from Fox?
I did. Yes.
Do you remember how he ended that Twitter space? What he talked about?
Boy, I don't. Please refresh my memory.
So I keep this clip whenever I go around the country and around Michigan and remind people of what's really at stake here. The initial part of the Twitter space, he was all focused on the Ukrainian war and all that kind of stuff, and how he couldn't talk about anything without being accused of being a Russian sympathizer, right? But the tail end of it, what he highlighted is, why aren't we talking about in the media? Why aren't we able to talk about the things that matter? Why aren't we able to talk about this? And he highlights that this is reminiscent of what happened during the Soviet era, where you couldn't talk about anything that was against the official narrative. I mean, Pravda was the official narrative, which means truth in Russian. And if you did anything that objected to that, you were completely censored, and sometimes a lot worse. And Tucker was highlighting that what was happening to the Soviet people back then is now happening to us in America. And we used to laugh at it back then when we saw how obvious it was with what was going on in the Soviet Union, but now it's actually happening here. And he went on to talk about how the information that we get access to is being controlled. Yeah. They pick what you are supposed to hear. They are essentially programming the American public to think what they want you to think. And thank God for all the meddling kids that are out there that are pushing back against this.
Absolutely
and
right.
Sorry, 2 + 2 is not equal to 5. It's equal to 4, and we're going to prove it for you.
It's right. And you mentioned the filtering of information that we're allowed to have access to, and the narratives that we're allowed to be exposed to. I had a conversation. I've been referencing this a couple times on Twitter and the live stream last night. It's just a fascinating conversation I had recently with someone that we don't see eye to eye on many things politically. But you can never assume that someone you disagree with has access, or has had access, has been exposed to the same stories. Never mind the narratives, never mind the opinions, the same stories that you have knowledge of. I have found it fascinating, and just calm, rational discussions about the state of our country to make a casual reference to something and then getting stopped in mid-thought because this person had never even heard of that event happening.
Yeah.
And so
people actually breathe air. I mean, it's like,
well, because
they even considered it before.
Because they're gatekeepers, the media outlets that they have chosen to make a part of their routines, and that they have chosen to go out and read and be exposed to, have shut that pipeline off, and aren't. And they're doing their readers and their listeners a disservice. And this happens on the left and the right. Please understand that I'm not saying this is exclusive to the left. I'm just saying, in my experience, I have to put pause and just go, well, let me explain what that is. And then think, wow, on my side of that, of the topic, we know it like the back of our hand. Yeah. And I'm sure there's stuff over there that they're, if you talk long enough, they'll start talking about stuff that you're like, whoa, what's that? And so the point is, to what you were saying, is we have these gatekeepers, and we have to be mindful of that. And you can't just assume that your friends and family who maybe disagree with you on a lot of stuff have seen the same stuff as you and just have a different opinion. They may have never seen that to begin with.
Yeah, Keith, here's where it gets frustrating, though, is that you know that, I know that, and a lot of people on the left know that, and everything else. The issue where things get really frustrating for me personally is when people have given up on curiosity about what's going on the other side, where they don't want to find they don't want to listen to that other information. And that's not a left versus right thing. I mean, that's people that have R's next to their name when you're trying to convey to them, here's what happened in the 2020 election. They don't even want to hear about it. I mean, we had I had senators that were part of the oversight committee that issued the official report on what happened in the 2020 election. They issued subpoenas for data in my old hometown of Livonia, Michigan, and Detroit. And it turns out they never even looked at the data that they subpoenaed and then before they wrote the report. A lot of times they don't even want to know the data. And for me, maybe it's the engineer in me that I'm constantly curious about. I want to be able to follow every one of the little breadcrumb trails until it makes sense, where it's actually cogent, where the hypothesis is supported by the evidence. Not everybody's wired that way, and we've got too many Americans right now that are just willing to put their head in the sand and not ask any questions, and that's when things are very dangerous for us as a society, I believe.
Yeah, and okay, nerd central here. And I got so much stuff to go through here. But one of the things de Tocqueville noticed when he was touring early America was that, you know, he would go into shops and parks or wherever, and just your average everyday American was having conversations about what is and what isn't constitutional.
Yeah.
Like what is and what isn't permissible under our system of laws here. I mean, we now live in a TikTok society,
Yeah.
and our attention spans. I mean, the word constitutional isn't even uttered by 95% of the populace, and so it's like you said, that's the word. It's frustrating that our nation is at the point where we're not even. Are you serious? We're seriously not going to have a conversation about the integrity of our elections?
Yeah,
Is
you
that
can't
what
talk
we're
about it anywhere.
right?
This is the only place. I mean, if podcasts like yours and others, that's the only place where you can discuss this.
It's one thing that you would have a overbearing government desperately trying to hold on to power that would try to crush that, but you have so many willing people in the media and in your daily lives that just don't want to hear it. They'll ostracize, they'll kick you out of their life if you dare have a conversation about or question the official
They'll
narrative.
fire you, right?
They'll
I mean, that's what
fire
happened
you.
to the late Lou Dobbs. That's what effectively happened with Tucker. He had a list of keywords or buzzwords he could not talk about. That's what's happening.
Yeah.
And it's not exactly good thing to happen in the land of the free and home of the brave.
Yeah, I will say though, like I said, I have a lot of stuff here, and we have a little bit over an hour to go here.
Yeah.
But something that I was going to save for the end that I'm actually going to do now, and I have a feeling I'm going to walk away with my tail between my legs here, but I'm getting a green marker and a red marker ready.
Yeah.
And I didn't tell you I was going to do this. And you may not be able to speak to this. And if you can't, just say, I don't know.
Yep.
But there were 6 states, as we all know, that in November of 2020 were just insane as far as, can we please get the results in from Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, Pennsylvania. Okay.
Yep.
So again, I'm putting Patrick on the spot here. From your perspective, knowing what you know, because you follow this stuff so closely. See, I'm setting it up to totally be a jerk. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right.
Okay. Can you tell us that want integrity in our elections? Can you tell us, hey, are things better, worse, about the same, or I don't know, not applicable? Like, in other words, you got 4 options here, Patrick. So let's do Arizona. Do you have an opinion? Is it any better there now than it was in 2020?
I understand that there's been some election reforms that have happened. However, Maricopa County is still the center of gravity for all votes in Arizona. So give me a red. That's going to be red. Until they improve what's going on in their largest county in the state, which is Maricopa, they can do everything they want at the state level, but ultimately it comes down to the county and local officials. And sorry, Maricopa is in serious need of repair.
Can I just say that when I go to 270towin.com and I mess around with the Electoral College map, based on my rudimentary knowledge of the news events around election integrity, I always try to apply that, especially to these 6 swing states. I'm always hovering over that. Am I going to make this red? Am I going to make this blue? I have been making Arizona blue, I will say. So far, no surprises there. I wish I had a blue one of these.
Then you're hearkening back to Karl Rove or who else will get out the old.
All right. So here's what we're going to do. Since all of these states, in my opinion, were stolen.
Yeah.
Keith Malinek's opinion. I'm going to go ahead and just do a little blue X there. Okay, so Nevada. Can I give it? So you know what? Hold on. Let me back up.
I haven't really followed Nevada because they got the 4 electoral votes, so I don't dig in on that one that much.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I'm going to make that a neutral.
We'll throw that up to the what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Stays in Vegas. Okay, so actually, red is actually going to be a good color on this board now. So Wisconsin, can we give it a red check or a blue X or a neutral? I don't know. Green.
We got a lot of good Patriots working hard out there, like. But
those Dropbox, man.
Yeah.
The Dropbox ruling.
That was good. And that's the only thing that I can think of that's in the positive category coming out of Wisconsin. Uh-huh. So I'm quietly optimistic about Wisconsin.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll do a little.
Matter of fact, yeah.
Red check there. Okay.
Michigan.
But hold on. But Wisconsin, though, they're still allowing drop boxes, right? But it's many less, right? Isn't that what that was?
I don't remember the details.
Okay,
All I remember is I'm at the mode where some of these states where it's the gestalt on it, and I know that it left me feeling good or it left me feeling bad.
Okay. So Keith, just accept the check and move on. Okay.
Yeah, and that one, I mean, I can always go back and provide chapter and verse, but I'll tell you, I get flooded with data right now, and that's actually one of the biggest challenges we have as election fraud investigators is that there literally is a fire hose coming at us on a lot of different areas. And just in my home state of Michigan, there's a fire hose. So it's tough to stay on top of it all. Georgia is one of the biggest fire hoses that are out there right now with everything coming out of DeKalb County and Fulton County there. So there's some good stuff.
Yeah. I'm just looking here. I'm cheating here. I'm looking at the Wisconsin drop boxes thing. Are we sure that's a? You know what? Your guest said give it a check, so just give it a check, Keith. Michigan, what are we doing with Michigan?
Check the check if you want. That's fine. Michigan definitely blue X, but we're fighting the good fight. I like I said, this is a case where we got to be up by 20 to win by 1.
Because I want to full disclosure. I'm always honest with my audience.
Hey, I want everybody in Wisconsin to get out there and vote and make that a solid red.
When I excitedly yelled drop boxes, it's because I was putting it in the negative thing. But if you've got, do you have good news?
It said that drop boxes were illegal, if I remember correctly, and so
I don't know that was the case. You know what? I'm just gonna say, I'm sorry to hijack the exercise that I gave you. I'm just gonna do that right there. I think drop boxes are a problem still in Wisconsin, big time. And as I'm scanning the headlines here.
Does everybody know why drop boxes are such a big deal? It's because,
explain.
So, first of all, this is part of the mail-in voting, which is the most vulnerable part of our elections. And by the way, that's not just Donald Trump saying that. That's Jimmy Carter saying that as well. So, and anybody who's got 2 neurons firing together up in their noggin, because, like I said, it's a third-party transaction. Oh. So the beautiful thing about these drop boxes is that you can go to what they call voter trap houses. And have all the ballots delivered there. Somebody goes off and fills them out the way that they want them to do. That's why these fraudulent voter registrations are such a big deal. Then they bring in people that will actually go off and distribute these completed ballots out to these drop boxes, because then they're not tracked by the United States Postal Service anymore. You don't have any receipt transactions or anything like that. And so this is all part of getting rid of the audit trail, which is their specialty. They want to get rid of the audit trail. You know what? You were right. You might want to put 3 blue X's in Michigan from what.
Okay, but I want to point out Wisconsin. I'm sorry that I totally hijacked your response on Wisconsin, because I'm just reading right now. We have gone from Wisconsin 4 years ago to over 500 drop boxes in the state to just 78. that's a win-ish. So
a drop on drop boxes is always good. Yeah.
However, you're right though.
Of course, the drop boxes, those 78 are bigger than ever before, right?
Don't ruin this. I'm not erasing that check.
Sure.
Okay, Georgia. I mean, my home state. I grew up there. I mean, I remember it was a different. All these places are just different now. But I had hope, and then that judge came in there and was like, "No, we're totally." Because remember, it was supposed to be hand counted, paper ballots, and then the judge did his deal, or was it?
Yeah, but see, I think we're winning the argument in Georgia, though. That's the part that gives me hope, and which means I know a lot of the election integrity activists on the ground in Georgia, Garland Favorito and Voter GA folks, and they've been at it a long time, and it gets a little frustrating and weary. But I honestly think there's enough awareness popping up in Georgia now that they're going to carry the day. So
all right,
and particularly in the wake of Hurricane Helene, don't underestimate people's resolve on saying enough of this garbage coming from the federal government. You guys they don't care about America. They're giving money to everybody overseas. But when Americans actually need a helping hand, they're nowhere to be found.
Let me ask you this here. I didn't put this on my list, but it was very close. Trump did pull it out in a squeaker. But what are your thoughts on North Carolina, especially since you mentioned Helene?
Yeah. Well, I know there's some folks that are going out there right now to make sure that everybody gets an opportunity to get out and vote that's eligible. So I can tell you that if I were living in North Carolina in the wake of what just happened and the response of the federal government, I would be crawling on broken glass to get to the polls to make sure that my voice was heard. So obviously North Carolina is going to be a big state. So I
cautiously red.
Yeah, I'm going to say cautiously red.
And I will say that a lot of people discount the fact that Asheville is a very, very blue city.
Yeah. Just
want to throw that out there. Food for thought. Now the areas around it, not the case.
No, the areas around it, just like everywhere else. I mean, you've seen the county maps, that are all red, and then you got this little blue dot.
Yeah. Okay. Pennsylvania. I mean, that's been crazy there.
Very much so. And we got a lot of good election integrity advocates out there. Yeah. Leah Hops, Heather Honey, and quite a few others that are having some court victories. So, and these are some of the Leah Hops and Greg Stenstrom. They're doing it pro se, and they're actually getting traction. So, I'm optimistic about Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And that's a lot of electoral votes there.
Sure is. That's our final tally there, folks. Arizona staying blue with Katie Hobbs and her. You talk about fraud. Oof. When I think of fraud, I don't just think of 2020 being stolen from Trump. I think of being stolen from Kerry Lake, and I think of it being stolen in the two Georgia Senate seats. But anyway, but look, I mean, I did not expect Wisconsin to be a check mark, but Pennsylvania, my gosh. Let's go. Okay. All right. So I was going to do that at the end.
If you talk to my wife, I'm an optimist at heart. So it's really painful to put 3 X's on the Michigan state here. But I'm one of those guys that's always going to say that the glass is half full.
Yeah. And what is it with Biden and Harris's Department of Justice suing Virginia and Alabama over the purging of their voter rolls? I mean, I asked that rhetorically. We know what's up with that. But is Virginia? I mean, are they? Alabama, you would assume, is safe red, but Virginia, are they?
I wouldn't assume Texas is safe red right now.
I wouldn't either. I've talked about that. I think. Well, this is a whole
nothing's safe. Nothing's
You're
safe
right.
at all.
You're right.
Just
when you become a target,
vote. Yeah. Make it as awkward as possible for them to explain the election results if they're trying to subvert it.
Yeah, and that's okay, but that's why I think Texas is safe for one more cycle, is because it would be too obvious this time. They're going to baby steps. They're going to steal Cruz's seat. But anyway, I'm getting off.
Let's face it. Well, hey, let's put a finer point on that. Let's face it. Kamala Harris is the least qualified candidate for the office of the President of the United States that has ever been offered by any major political party, bar none. And so the fact that she's even getting a debate with Donald Trump is kind of a disgrace to our whole system of government from my perspective.
Well, she already stole the nomination from her party. So,
yeah, and
already,
yeah,
1 for
she
1.
didn't receive one vote in a primary.
Right. Okay, so let me see here. Kind of talked about that already. Talk to us about, and by the way, before I forget, I want to, or I don't, not forget, but I just want to make sure that we constantly remind people of your 2 books, Wrestling Gators and the 2020 Coup, because you stay busy writing, man. Check out those books. Talk to us about the Detroit Public Accuracy Test. What was that all about?
All right, so on the subject of transparency, whenever we go off and question election results, I say, trust us. We've got systems put in place to make sure that everything's secure. And we're also transparent about everything that we do. And so in statute, and Michigan, like other states, have requirements around what's called a public accuracy test. So if you want to prove that the machines are counting the votes accurately, what you do is you get a bunch of sample ballots and you run them through the tabulator in front of general public monitoring it. And then once it's done tabulating those votes, you check it against what the vote tally should be. And if it checks out, you say everything checks out. And then we seal up the equipment and deploy it in support of Election Day operations, right? Except here's what really happens. In the city of Detroit, in this upcoming 2024 election, they have 400 precincts. They have 65 what they call AV counting boards, absentee vote counting boards, that process ballots that have been submitted absentee. And then they have 13 voting centers. All these are processing and tabulating ballots. And just so you know, when you're actually doing an accuracy test, the ballots vary by precinct typically. So there's different ballot styles because different communities have different measures up for a vote. Maybe you've got a township clerk up for a vote. Well, that township clerk may not be up for a vote in all the different areas. Maybe you're part of the village or whatever that's in here. So you're going to have a different ballot if you're in a village, or you have different millages. Maybe you got a special assessment that applies to precinct 1, but not to precinct 2.
Right. When you're printing up and I would highly encourage everyone to do this. When you are going to vote, just have your sample ballot printed up and filled out ahead of time, and then you can just get in there and go boom, 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 boom. You've done your research at home. You're not standing there going, "Oh my gosh, I've never thought that this would be on my ballot." But to your point, make sure you print it up for your address and not someone 6 blocks away, because it could be completely different. To your point.
Yeah, and they take advantage of that a little bit now. I'll get into that a little bit later, maybe, but. So there's a lot of different ballot styles. Matter of fact, in the city of Detroit, there's presumably 65 different ballot styles. So all those 400 precincts, some of them are common with one another. They have the same measures on the ballot. Some of them aren't, but ultimately we're told that it resolves into about 65 unique ballot styles. They tabulate the votes for these different ballot styles using Dominion machines. And in this case, throughout the whole city of Detroit, they use what are called image cast precinct machines, which are the in-person tabulators, the slow speed tabulators. Back in 2020, they had a mix of the ICP machines and their higher speed image cast central machines. In this election, I'm told they're only using the image cast precinct machines. And so when I went to the public accuracy test, and in recognition of the fact that here they have 400 precincts, how many tabulators would you expect to see if they're doing a public accuracy test of the tabulators? Now, remember, every precinct has one of these unique precinct tabulator. How many tabulators would you expect to see based on all the information I shared already?
Oh gosh, many.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair enough. Here's the deal.
I'm not good with math, Patrick.
We walked into this 25 by 20 room, and there's 12 tabulators in there. So there's 4. When you actually tally up all the complete number of precinct tabulators they have in the city of Detroit for the AV counting board and for early voting sites, it's around 535 tabulators. They wanted to convince us that everything was on the up and up because they ran a bunch of pieces of paper through 12 unique 12 tabulators. And I have it on good authority that the 12 tabulators that they tested in the public accuracy test are not even deployed in support of election operations. They're the poster child. They're the window dressing. They keep them at the public accuracy test so that they can say that they did their duty. So that's a sham, a complete sham. And I've highlighted this in the past, and I've done even more detailed analyses than that in the past when we were trying to trace the audit trail on something that unfortunately is probably the most nebulous part of our election system and should be the most transparent. That is the vote tally audit trail. What happens between when a ballot gets inserted into a tabulator and when you start seeing the election results spread out on Blaze TV or CNN or Fox News on the bottom of the screen? How do you go from point A to point B on that? That is one of the biggest mysteries in our election system right now. And I'm saying that as somebody who's been served as vice chair of the Election and Government Reform Committee in the Michigan Senate, and who's also been studying this in detail for the last 4 years. That's deliberately opaque and is as near as I can get. And when you have dog and pony shows like this public accuracy test that are just meant to check the box and give people a false impression that our elections are being secured, it really pisses you off because.
So, okay.
Well, no. Here, just to put a finer point on that, our election systems, they've been designated as critical infrastructure components by the federal government. Critical infrastructure means that our nation doesn't last if there's a subversion of the integrity of the system. We also have designated gasoline supplies as a critical infrastructure, food supplies, electrical grids. We add election systems to that. And I worked on critical infrastructure components when I worked with Boeing on the International Space Station. I worked on the life support system. Astronauts tended to think of that as critical. And so there was a level of rigor that went into the testing and certification and configuration management that we do not do anything close to that with our elections. And that gives me concern, and which is also why I, like Mike Lindell, are pushing for get rid of these stupid electronic voting systems. It's like we're giving advanced technology to people that are just banging rocks together to make fire. And if you don't understand how they work, you don't understand the vulnerabilities on it, and you don't understand the responsibility and the responsible measure that it takes to secure those systems, you have no business using them.
Yeah, no, and you asked the question, how does that number get to the end of the line there? And one of the things I always assumed, and shame on me, was that someone of authority at each local precinct, voting location, you have a representative of the Republican Party and representative of the Democrat Party. And now I think, honestly, my take now is that any party that is represented on a ballot should have the right to have a representative at each polling location. Then you get everybody to agree on the number, preferably a paper ballot, but get everybody to agree on that. And then you pick up the phone, everybody's there, maybe it's a speaker phone, I don't know, and you call the Secretary of State's office.
Yeah.
This is my dream scenario that shouldn't be this difficult to pull off. And then the Secretary of State records that number because they have a code or secure and whatever. And plus you have multiple people there that are signing. We call the Secretary of State at 9:27 p.m., whatever. Secretary of State then reports it to all the media outlets, press release or whatever. Here is the official results from Dallas County, Texas. Here are the official blah, blah, blah. And for you to sit there and tell us, Patrick, that you have been so involved in this as an official, and if I heard you right, and I think I did, you're saying it's a mystery how those numbers get from point A to point B? Like, we don't even know how those numbers are being reported? No. How is that possible in this country?
Yeah, it's done because they're telling you that you can't peek behind the curtain and there's no transparency, and they intimidate people that attempt that. I'll give you a personal experience. So back in 2022, during the August primary, I I decided that instead of going out to the AV County Board in Detroit, instead of going out to the polls, I wanted to go to the county. And I wanted to see how the county was rolling up the votes from the local precincts and the local communities. And the official narrative is that, when the polls are closed, they print out a final results tape, take that results tape, put the results onto a flash drive, put it into a sealed envelope. A courier transports that sealed envelope out to the county seat. The county takes the flash drive out of that sealed envelope, inserts it into the county server. The county server uploads it to the internet so everybody can see what the election results are. That's the official narrative. I went there to see if that's actually what happened. So as a certified poll challenger, former state senator, I decided to go to the Wayne County Clerk's office to witness that roll-up of the votes. And so I won't get into all the details on this. If you want, I got a Rumble channel, Election Integrity. You can actually see the surveillance video that I had to go off and pay for that documents and validates everything that I'm asserting here right now, because I was by myself for observing a lot of this. But first of all, I was prohibited
from... What is your Rumble channel? Tell us what that is so people can...
It's just Election Integrity. I think that's actually the name of the Rumble channel.
Okay.
And so I was prohibited as a certified poll challenger from witnessing the roll-up, which is a violation of Michigan law, but I didn't press on it. And what they did is they said, it's okay for you to sit out in the hallway. And they situated a deputy sheriff to make sure that I didn't go into the Wayne County Clerk's office, because I'm a really dangerous guy, right? Mm-hmm. They had two Detroit police officers were called to the scene to make sure that I didn't go anywhere. And then they had two special agents from the Attorney General's office, all assigned to make sure that I couldn't go into the clerk's office as a certified poll challenger to observe the tallying of the votes at the county level.
Iron Curtain bullshit.
Yeah, I was pretty ticked, but I just sat there and started taking notes. And what happened is the election returns started coming in a little after 10 p.m. that night. And I monitored which communities were bringing in their election results. And they would bring in their little packet, their little envelope, and then they'd have a little clerk representative and a magistrate from the local court that would take that information in the sealed envelope and place it in a mail bin behind the desk. Now, this is all outside of the clerk's office, so I could walk up to him, see what community was bringing them in. And I was taking a note as to when each community brought in their little flash drives. And I was keeping track of that. Meanwhile, I had my little smartphone with me, and I'm monitoring the county election results website. And I'm going, they're putting out election results right now. I wonder what communities are showing on the election results. And it turns out that the communities that they're posting up online are not the communities that have brought their flash drives in. And oh, by the way, those flash drives never went into the clerk's office. They sat out in the mail bin out in the hallway the whole time. So they were never transported in there. Meanwhile, as a good old IT professional like I am, I'm hearing in the background in the room, hey, Van Buren Township just uploaded. I go, oh, really? Uploaded. That means that they're connected to the internet. They're uploading they're uploading the results via the internet. That's not what they said what was happening.
Oh my God.
And so it's all smoke and mirrors. They are lying about how it's actually conducted. And I've got this now on surveillance video. Oh, by the way, one other example.
3 X's for Michigan, and now you see.
Yeah, maybe even 5 X's. I don't know. But so afterwards, I decided to go off and do a FOIA request, which I finally had to file a lawsuit to get access to the surveillance video. They wouldn't give it to me. It took 9 months to get it. When I finally did get it, not only did I corroborate with timestamps all the data that I'm sharing with you here, but I also found out that all the face diapers that they were forcing people to wear in order as a condition of staying in the building came off as soon as I disappeared. So if anybody is curious as to why they're forcing those face diapers back during COVID, it's for compliance. It's so that they'd have an excuse to get rid of you if you decided not to buy into their narrative.
Can you explain, you had a tweet a few days ago. You've already covered the bad news about the 12 machines there for
the tip of
public
the
access.
iceberg.
Yeah. But you did say, is this good news? The Dominion image cast. I wanted you to kind of expound on this. What is the ICC tabulators used will no longer be used to process
Yeah,
ballots in Detroit?
I was getting desperate for some good news.
Oh
So
no!
I kind of lowered the bar a little bit on this.
Okay, all right.
Right here's the deal. So in the Detroit Public Accuracy Test, when I found out that they're no longer using the high-speed Dominion tabulators, the ICC tabulators, they were using ICP tabulators. The good news on that is that the ballots stay inside of a sealed storage container, whereas with the ICC tabulators, the high-speed ones, the election workers would actually have to take the ballots and then put them into a ballot storage container separately. So there was room for mishap, if you will, in the transport from point A to point B into the ballot containers and the sealing of the containers. Mm-hmm. We should theoretically not have that issue now with the ICP machines. So that's what I was digging. I was lowering the bar real low, but I saw that as a positive movement.
Okay. All right. So we alluded to her earlier. Please tell us about Gold Star mom, Tina Peters, out in Colorado, and what's been going on with her.
Oh, yeah. I first got introduced to Tina Peters out at Mike Lindell's Cyber Symposium and found out what she had done. And she, just so everybody knows a little backstory on it. So she's the clerk for Mesa County, Colorado. And she found out that Dominion was going to be called out to service her election equipment. And when she had been contacting Dominion service personnel, she asked them, well, do you make a copy of the data before you do that? And they said no. And she had a previous election that was being called into question. She wanted to make sure that she preserved her audit trail. She preserved her election records. That's one of the duties of a county clerk. Matter of fact, all clerks, you're responsible for the security of the records under your jurisdiction. And so she was trying to get some of the government personnel to go off and do that, and they weren't very helpful in that regard. And so she solicited a third party to go off and get a forensic image of it before Dominion came in to service her equipment. And then when Dominion serviced the equipment, she brought them back and took an image of the equipment afterwards. And what she found out was pretty startling, and it's actually documented in a series of 3 reports. I think you can find it at tinapeters.com. I can't remember her website on it. If you can't find it there, you can find it at letsfixstuff.org. But there's 3 reports on it, and what we found was pretty damning, is that it's evidence that not only did they destroy election records, which is in violation of Title 52, Section 20701 of the United States Code, which you have to preserve all election records, digital and physical, for a period of 22 months after an election. Not only did they destroy election records, but they had evidence of 36 wireless connections. They've had evidence of non-certified software being installed on that, capable of changing the election results without anybody knowing. They had evidence of actual tampering with the election results. They actually had 2 sets of databases, kind of like Al Capone had 2 sets of books for his accounting purposes. That's what he finally got busted on. What she discovered was 2 sets of election results databases. That's not good. And one of them was started something like 5 days after early voting started at no election official's direction. So you get an idea why they did not want any of this information to come out anywhere, because it's pretty damning.
Sure is.
So they went after her with a vengeance. I mean, pretty much the whole government inside of Colorado, with Jenner Griswold, who's Secretary of State, and everybody else I mean, they made her public enemy number 1. They treated her like dirt. And when she had her trial before a jury, so it was a jury trial, which is good, the judge actually, and this is what really ticks me off more than anything, because there's no doubt she should have been found innocent on this. Mm-hmm. The judge prohibited disclosure of the statutory responsibilities of a clerk before the jury. So she's being tried for willful neglect of duty, but the judge did not allow a full disclosure of her responsibilities as a clerk before the jury to consider it. So,
again, Iron Curtain bullshit.
It pissed me off so much. I can't.
Were these state charges or federal charges that she was found guilty of? Is she in a state prison or a federal prison?
State charges. There are 4 felonies and 3 misdemeanors.
So there's no chance of a federal pardon by Donald Trump on January 20th.
And so, yeah, this is, if you remember Scooter Libby, he got prosecuted on process crime. That's what happened in this case. Instead of looking at what she was trying to do, which is secure the election records, they decided to go off and prosecute her on how she went about doing it. And I just, anyway. Well, might want to move on to a new topic before my
let me do that for you. Hang on a second.
The color contrast on the broadcast.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. So I wanna just do this real quick. Sorry, I gotta revisit the whiteboard one more time here.
Okay.
So let's just go through this let's just go through this. Arizona, we're not gonna give to Trump. Nevada, we're not gonna give to Trump. Wisconsin, I've rethought this. We're not gonna give it to Trump. Bear with me, y'all. Michigan, definitely not giving to Trump. Okay, we're gonna keep North Carolina red, and we're all we're gonna have to do is we're just gonna have to flip Georgia and Pennsylvania because you got the 16 electoral votes in Georgia. You got the 19 in Pennsylvania. I mean, this is Keith math territory, y'all. But look, Trump ended 2020 with 235. So let's do the math together. What's 235 plus 16? That gets us to 251. What's 251 plus 19? Boom, magic number 270 achieved. Ladies and gentlemen, we just have to flip Georgia and Pennsylvania.
Yep.
That's it.
It really is pretty straightforward on that.
It really is. It just comes down to Georgia, Pennsylvania, and if everything else stays the same.
But you're getting to the heart of why this era of big data is so concerning, because now it's really not about the whole state anymore. It's about targeted counties, targeted communities like Detroit. And I'll just give you an example of how our system is vulnerable to flipping, even on a national level for a presidential election. I don't have to have corruption in all 83 counties in the state of Michigan.
Right.
I can just zero in on one with the highest population. Matter of fact, I don't even have to zero in on the whole county. I can go to just to Detroit. And I'll just tell you, if the actual voter turnout in a city like Detroit is around 15%, but they tell everybody that the voter turnout is around 65% because of all the activities of these voter trap houses and drop boxes and everything else that's going on, guess what? That's a 50% slush fund for votes that they can vote however the heck that they want in the most populous city. That's over 200,000 votes in a election that in 2020 was decided by 154,188 votes.
I mean, that is a term that needs to catch on. Slush votes.
Yeah.
That's exactly what this is, man. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yes.
A couple more things here for you. I know your time's limited today, and I just want to ask you that you're always welcome back here. Please keep in touch with me. If you got something big that we need to discuss, let's make sure, especially in the aftermath. Who knows? I hope that it is cut and dry and Trump is declared the outright winner on Tuesday night, November 5th. But if the aftermath is anything like it was in 2020, that I hope people like you can join me for discussions whenever necessary. We might have to go live or whatever. So I just don't want, I want the audience. I'm really telling the audience that I'm not going to pigeonhole myself to just Thursday broadcasts. If the situation on the ground merits more broadcasts. So anyway, Patrick, I hope that you and I can keep in touch, or hopefully we can just pop champagne on November 5th. Okay. So talk to us about, you had the, did I write this down correctly? The elector conference project, or election. I'm sorry, the
election confidence project. So
with Mike Lindell. Sorry, I wrote that down wrong.
Yeah. There's a few initiatives that Mike is working on. One is called the Voter Identity Protection Project. Another is the Great Petition Project. But the one we were talking about was the Election Confidence Project. And that's something that we're going to be talking about in earnest on Monday of next week.
Boy, my chicken
and
scratch really failed there. The Election Confidence Project. Got it
yeah,
now.
that's all right. You're putting your medical degree to good use.
Well, I was in a hurry. We were about to go on the air, and I was trying to. So that's my fault. Yeah. Okay. So Election Confidence Project. Yes, sir. Please tell us.
So back in 2016, what happened? Hillary Clinton was saying that the election was stolen from her, right? And everybody was complaining that it was not there was lack of election integrity. In 2020, it's Donald Trump and folks like myself that are saying that that was stolen. So the Election Confidence Project is saying, okay, guys, we don't want to go down this little roller coaster anymore. We want to have confidence in the results of our elections. How do you get confidence? Through transparency. How do you get transparency? Now we're talking about conducting a full forensic audit of the election, regardless of who they declare as a winner on November 6th. I don't care who it is. I want to give our election system a proctology exam, and not just a recount. Recounts are garbage from my perspective. It's one little data point. They try to make us believe that that's the end all be all of election integrity. It's not. Just like in Maricopa County, they had a recount in Maricopa County in the wake of the 2020 election. All the ballot containers that they were provided to do the recount were already open. The seals were broken. Matter of fact, one of them had human defecation in it. I don't know if you've heard about that at all. That's how much disdain they had for the folks that were performing the audit. They had to come in hazmat suits to go off and address it. But recounts, that doesn't mean anything. And this is one thing I agree with Jovan on as well. I mean, how do you know which of the votes that you're counting in there are cast by real voters and which ones are not? Which ones are legitimately cast by those real voters? You don't. If they're counterfeit votes, you're just counting counterfeit ballots in a recount. You need to look at the whole chain of custody. And I simplify the chain of custody into 4 basic records. The registered voter file, that tells you everybody that's eligible to vote. Then you have the poll books, that essentially is a precinct-specific extract of the voter registration file used by election workers. That determines who gets a ballot. Then you have the ballots, and then you have the vote tally itself. All 4 of those key election records, the voter registration database, the voter history as captured by the poll books, and the ballots and the vote tallies themselves, they all better be telling the same story. If they don't, you know that you've got a fraudulent election. And, if you can keep those in sync, we're good. And the Election Confidence Project, what we're calling for is an audit, a professional audit that goes well beyond the rinky-dink recount narrative, and actually goes upstream and looks at whether or not those are real voters that cast those ballots in the first place. And then they make sure that the vote tally at the end that determines who won the election is consistent with all the data upstream of it. So that's what we're seeking, and it's really just transparency. We want an audit. And by the way, we want this in all 50 states. Okay? There isn't a red state and a blue state from this. There's issues. I've been to red states all across the country. I've been to blue states. I live in a blue state. I've been to the purple states as well. Guys, we have issues everywhere. It's just that sometimes we choose to ignore them. And we can't ignore this anymore. This is too precious. Our election system, the integrity of our election system is too precious. It's a critical infrastructure component. We can't leave it to chance. We got to treat it like it's a moon landing and have the discipline we need to go off and make sure that those astronauts return home alive. We need that same rigor applied to how we treat our election systems. And right now, it's not even kindergarten level of security monitoring or rigor right now is being applied. We got some work to do, and it's my hope and Mike's hope that we can get that kind of confidence back in our election results when we have a free and open and transparent examination of all the election records that currently we're being prohibited from doing.
And the website is electionconfidence.com, correct? Yep. Electionconfidence.com. Is that the same place as the LindellPlan.com? Or
it'll get you there, but yeah, you can use it as a starting point, the LindellPlan.com, and that'll take you out to all the other sites.
So you have these tireless efforts from people like yourself, and while all of this is going on, and you're doing your best to stay on top of the gatekeepers and keep our election officials accountable, and you're trying to at the same time, hold down a job, pay your bills, pay the mortgage on time. You stay obviously very busy.
Yeah.
So can people, if people are moved to try to help the cause, and maybe they want to donate some money, some time, what have you, is there a specific place that they can go, or what would you recommend to somebody like me that maybe,
Yeah.
look, I don't have the brain power or the knowledge or the background to really dive in. I sit here and I talk to people that understand this stuff, but
Yeah.
maybe I'm better suited donating money. Like, where would I send money, or help me understand how I can help?
Well, I appreciate that offer, Keith. This is kind of leads into the story within the story, if you will. For the first 3 years after the 2020 election, my wife and I, we didn't have a paycheck. I was going off and investigating this stuff on a dime, and I essentially put everything else in my life on hold. And every once in a while, we get some book sales that would pop in, but ultimately, frankly, on those books, we're a little bit better than break even on the 2022. So we're not exactly keeping the lights on with that. But I'll tell you what happened back in October of last year is that Mike Lindell hired me to help him in the pursuit of election integrity. So everything that I was doing for 3 years, effectively pro bono across the board, I'm doing the same thing now, except that Mike has now pulled me into Lindell Management, and I'm working for him to go off and execute this and helping out nationally. So thankfully, this is the way God works. We were in mana mode for the longest time, and now he's opened up the barn for us going forward. We're able to help out other people that are there, but Mike needs people's help. Right. And so all the efforts that he's been working on, you guys know Mike Lindell's been targeted more than anybody. If you can go to...
And I wanted to point that out because people that dare to stick their necks out and dare to take a stand against this regime and these forces of evil, quite frankly, they will mischaracterize you, they will mock you, they will do whatever it takes. They can't attack the message, so they do their best to mold the messenger into what they want you to believe that messenger is, and it's so heinous and it's so evil. And don't fall for this stuff.
Yeah, and I just a case in point along that targeting. I was there with Mike when Jimmy Kimmel called him up and invited him to be on his show. I don't know if you remember his appearance on the Jimmy Kimmel show. Jimmy Kimmel was so obnoxious, he put Mike into a vending machine because Mike had problems with machines, right? And he mocked him the whole time during that, but Mike agreed to it for one simple reason. By going on that show, he was going to be able to reach people that hadn't heard the truth about what's going on with our election systems. And if he just hit one person, 5 people, 10 people that otherwise would not get access to that information, he was going to do it no matter what Jimmy Kimmel did to ridicule him. That's the kind of guy he is. And so if you want to help Mike, literally they're targeting My Pillow. They're targeting obviously all of Mike's election integrity operations. But if you go to lindellplan.com, you can go off and support his efforts out there and donate to the Lindell Offense Fund, because that's, every time Mike has seen a problem, what he calls a block out there regarding getting the truth out about the elections, he's invested millions of dollars to go off and overcome that block. So when they shut down when the media shut down access to discussion of election fraud, he bought and created Frank Speech. When the big tech platforms were censoring folks like myself from whenever we mentioned internet connectivity, he went off and bought Frank Social. When they went off and decided that they were going to that they swore up and down that these machines were not connected to the internet, he goes, I'm going to go off and get these little monitoring devices. We're going to go off and prove to them that these machines are connected to the internet. We don't need them anymore now, but because these guys are not shy about saying they're connected to the internet typically anymore. So, but I tell you, Mike has been all in, and documentaries that he's put together, the defense of folks like Tina Peters, all the lawsuits that he's been involved in, proactively to try to resolve this. Guys, he's all in, and please support Mike and his efforts. And And Mike has a way of supporting all the other meddling kids through your generosity.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Please help out where you can. I put on the screen there lindellplan.com. Of course, there's electionconfidence.com. And any way that you can help, honestly, save the country. I don't think it's an exaggeration.
And here's a simple way: share this podcast.
Yeah.
Share information, because, like you said, not a lot of people are hearing this information, and they need to hear it. It's being censored. And I mean, I could give you a whole bunch of websites to go off and follow here, but the bottom line is get curious, get involved, make sure that you're in red pill land, not blue pill land. I know blue pill tastes a lot better, but we need to be a nation of red pills right now.
Yeah, amen. Before we go, do we have time here, or should we save this for another conversation? The Millersville, Tennessee Assistant Police Chief, I forgot to mention this earlier, Sean Taylor. You said that he has connected quite a few dots in his own investigation. Do we have time to explain the NGOs and how they have corrupted this country?
Well, I think we'll put a little teaser into it. I mean, you know all the headwinds that we've been facing with. How do you get all these people censoring folks like us? How do you get the influence over the big tech, the influence over big media, to go off and shut down all this communications? Well, you do it by spreading money around, right? And so before you can spread that money around, you got to launder it. And what Sean Taylor has discovered is a pretty, and it's, by the way, what he discovered, and we'll get into in just a sec, around how mortgage fraud is being used as an enabler to launder money from cartels and from foreign nations to subvert our elections. I have personal experience with this as a Michigan State Senator, because some of this was brought to my attention back when I was serving in the Michigan Senate in the 2017-2018 timeframe. And I called for the state police to open an investigation on very similar allegations to what Sean's been investigating. And state police came back to me and validated that, no, there's definitely smoke on the horizon on this, and it's definitely valid consideration. So that's what got me very interested in Sean's investigation. And what he's discovered is that people are, the way that they're laundering money is that there are mortgage transactions where the seller is getting $30 million for a house that's valued at $300,000. And then they've got this back end loan of around $25 million that indicates that there's some sort of a string attached to that $30 million, if you will, that they can call on anytime they want. And obviously, if you get a $30 million payout on a house, now it's legitimizing where you got that source of income for purposes of financial transactions. And you can spread that money around through organizations like Act Blue, and I would submit even Win Red on the Republican side. And they do it via what are called Smurfs on the Act Blue side, which essentially, oftentimes, as indicated by James O'Keefe and a good friend of mine, Bob Cushman here in Michigan, they've gone door to door and looked at the people who have donated to various political candidates via Act Blue with small donations, but they've repeated many, many, many times, like $10, $10, $10, $10. And people that are completely unemployed find themselves donating $20,000 to political candidates.
They have no idea what the person at the door is talking about.
And once again, this is all done in a database, right? So it's all background transaction with IT. These people have no idea what's going on. This is how that money comes into the system. It's not only going to political candidates, it's going to non-government organizations that suppress our free speech across the board. They're the ones who organize protests out of capitals, the shutdown DC movement, Black Lives Matter. That's where all this money is going. And that's why it is such a tough road to haul for meddling kids such as myself, because we are outgunned from a financial perspective, like orders of magnitude to one on it. And we literally rub nickels together to go off and get enough money for a FOIA request. These guys are creating NGOs out of thin air on a whim and giving their the directors of these NGOs six-figure salaries. So that's what we're up against. Here's how the money gets into the system. And And so what Sean's doing right now, which started out as a narcotics investigation, but has developed into connecting quite a few dots across the board, including elections, he deserves to be lauded. And of course, he's getting attacked now too. So he deserves support as well. Anything you do to support Sean would be great too.
Yeah. Okay. And you said it right there, is that we are constrained on our side by our ethic and our adherence to the Constitution, and we play by the rules, and we do what is right, and we try to fight within the limits and the parameters that are laid out before us, and then we don't even have access, really. Speaking of you, people like yourself aren't even given access to the areas that you are legally allowed to go. And meanwhile, on the other side, there are groups and people like this that you just described that there are no rules, there are no boundaries, there are no parameters, and
throwing money around. And which there's, just to put a finer point on this, right? Ultimately, all this comes into the justice system discussion, right? Mm-hmm. Ultimately, we want accountability for these malfeasance. Here's something we didn't touch on, but I think it's important to kind of, maybe it's a good way to wrap it up and see how bad this really is with a very tangible example. So we filed a lawsuit against Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson back in right before the general election in 2022 for issuing unlawful poll challenger guidelines. And the Michigan Court of Claims agreed with us. She appealed it, went to the Michigan Court of Appeals. Michigan Court of Appeals agreed with us in a 3-0 decision. She appealed it again, went to the Michigan Supreme Court. At the same time this case is sitting before the Michigan Supreme Court, the Michigan Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, who is a defendant on a lawsuit before the Michigan Supreme Court, issued an $82,500 donation to Justice Kyra Bolden, who sits on the Michigan Supreme Court and ended up authoring the majority opinion that overturned what had previously been unanimous decisions against Benson and came out with a new opinion that was in favor of Benson. And so I've filed a request for investigation with the Judicial Tenure Commission and the Michigan Attorney Grievance Commission to get their bar licenses removed. But that's what we're up against. That's how this money gets brought to bear. And that's what starts feeding these fake narratives around we never win any court battles.
Okay. Yes. Boy, that is a line that you hear so much. Oh my gosh. Yes. Yep. Well said. Okay. So electionconfidence.com. Be sure to go there. lindellplan.com. Be sure to go there. And please, please, please check out Patrick's books, Wrestling Gators and the 2020 Coup. Follow him on Twitter and set it up so you get notifications when he tweets, because he is on top of all of this stuff at PJ Colbeck. I will say that Patrick, this has been an enlightening conversation. There's been so much, and if you joined us late, go back and watch this the stuff that you missed. Please, there's valuable stuff in here. And please share this with people that need to see conversations like this so that they understand what is going on and what this nation, not a party, not the Republican Party, not a candidate, not Donald Trump, but the nation, what it is up against. And if we don't have integrity in our vote and we don't get to steer the ship where our collective will wants it to go, then we don't have a country. And then we have a dictatorship, and we are falling prey to the whims of whoever has access to the data, right? Basically. Yeah. So, Patrick, yes, and I hope that we can talk again soon. And who knows? Maybe the next time we talk, we'll be celebrating great news. But I do hope to talk to you at some point in the future, and I appreciate your time today. Thank you for spending your afternoon with us, sir.
Thanks, Keith. I appreciate it. And we just got to get the word out to as many people. So we're officially deputizing your audience to share this information with everybody that they know.
I love it. I love it. All right. So go to all those websites, electionconfidence.com, lindellplan.com, buy Patrick's books, and follow him on Twitter. We will see y'all again tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern for the Friday live stream. We'll hang out with Brad Staggs, Steve Baker, a couple buddies of mine. We'll watch some animal videos, and we'll have a good end of the week and get you into the weekend. Thanks so much, as always, for joining me here at the mic, and I will see you all again tomorrow. Bye-bye.